Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Robo Celestial here with a new video for you. Welcome to What If Deku Could Use Haki. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying, sit back and relax, you're in for a treat. Izuku stood prepared with his team, staring down his bicolored adversary. On the opposite side of the stretch was Team Todoroki, all patiently waiting for an order to attack. Silence filled the air until it grew thick. That is when it was broken. Todoroki shot a stream of ice towards Team Midoriya, but to no effect. Left, Izuku shouted, prompting his team to maneuver and dodge the attack. Todoroki got a little annoyed, until he shot another ice barrage. Right, the green-haired boy shouted, and his team obeyed. Todoroki's annoyance grew wider by the second, for it seemed that Izuku was able to see through any attempt he made at immobilizing them. The bicolored boy gave another order to his team before they charged towards Team Midoriya. Izuku gave only one look before he gave an order of his own. Left, he shouted, right before he raised his voice a second time, Takoyami, prompting the bird-like teen to maneuver Dark Shadow. This was a close call, for Team Midoriya had dodged the charge before barely blocking off Kaminari's lightning attack. Both teams staggered backwards as they tried to formulate a strategy. Izuku knew that Dark Shadow wouldn't be able to handle another lightning attack, but he also knew that Kaminari would be out of commission for a while. Todoroki was getting more and more frustrated by the second. Nothing worked. It was as if Izuku could see everything that was happening. The bicolored teen clenched his fist as he settled on a plan. Izuku may be able to see everything, but he shouldn't be able to keep it up forever. All Team Todoroki needed to do, if they wanted that headband, was to continuously attack Team Midoriya until the green-haired boy can't tell what's happening. Todoroki gave another order to his team before they charged towards Izuku once more. The green-haired boy saw this coming and responded by giving his team their own orders. This continued on for a while. Team Todoroki kept failing their attempts at attacking, all because Izuku kept maneuvering his team perfectly. Todoroki had miscalculated when forming his plan. It was true that Izuku had a limit to how much he would be able to see, but the bicolored teen didn't take Izuku's most recent training into account. In other words, Izuku can literally do this all day. Team Todoroki took another step back, just as it was announced that only a few minutes remained. Todoroki didn't know what to do at this point. There wasn't nearly enough time to form a plan, and even if he did have enough time, it would most certainly not work. The bicolored teen had faced many great and terrifying things in his life, but he never imagined that Izuku Midoriya's impregnable defense would be one of them. Todoroki grit his teeth even more than before, almost feeling helpless in this situation. That is until one of his teammates spoke up. Everyone, I have a plan. It'll put me out of commission for the remainder of the match, but I'm certain that it'll definitely get us those 10 million points, Ida shouted, as he carefully watched the moves of Team Midoriya. Todoroki regained his composure as he calmly responded, care to fill us in on this plan? Ida was silent for a second, for he was still staring at Izuku. The green-haired boy was observing them, analyzing every move that they made. He may have worn a neutral expression, but the green-haired boy still made it clear that he was in control of the situation at all times. Ida noticed this, and he became determined to prove his adversary wrong. Midoriya is able to observe and react to our attacks even when we're perfectly coordinated, so we need to grab that headband before he has a chance to react, Ida told his team, making sure that Izuku wouldn't hear any of it. The remaining members of Team Todoroki roughly understood what their blue-haired companion meant. So far they've been focused on exhausting Izuku by using multiple coordinated attacks. What they needed to do was deal one attack that he had no hope of defending against, even if he could see it coming. In other words, they needed to be faster. I agree. Let's do it, Ida. Todoroki then responded, prompting his teammates to begin preparation. Izuku carefully observed the other team with his observation, until he saw something that caught his interest. He could see Ida's emotions stirring. Same for the rest of his teammates. This, along with everything else that he saw, put Izuku on his guard as he called out to his team, be ready, they're planning something, prompting everyone to carefully focus on Team Todoroki. Both teams stared at each other, until a weird blue light emitted from Ida's legs. Izuku's eyes went wide as the blue-haired boy bellowed, "Recipro burst," before taking off. A powerful gust of wind shot by the entirety of Team Midoriya, leaving everyone speechless. Team Todoroki was now behind Izuku, having moved at speeds that were nearly imperceivable. The audience stared wide-eyed at the two teams, expecting Team Midoriya's points to drop to 0. What happened instead shocked everyone down to the core. What they saw was blood flying about, accompanied by the sound of bones breaking. The audience looked closer, and saw where it had come from. It was Todoroki. And the broken fingers on his right hand. The bicolored teen slowly looked over at his broken hand before he screamed in agony. That was a good trick. You nearly got me. A dull voice that people then realized belonged to Izuku said. Everyone's gaze locked onto the green-haired boy as his team slowly turned around to face their opponents. But you have to be much faster than that if you intend on taking this headband from me, Izuku then said. As Team Todoroki finally got a good look at him, he had his right arm up towards them, and they could clearly see blood smeared onto it. It didn't take long for the team to figure out that the blood belonged to Todoroki, and what this meant. Somehow, in some way, Izuku was faster, even when Ida moved at a speed that almost no one could react to. Izuku had managed to defend. Not only that, but his arm didn't feel normal. Todoroki's hand had made a collision with Izuku's arm, but it didn't feel like an arm. If the bicolored boy didn't know what he made contact with, he would have believed that his hand had crashed into a metal post. Team Todoroki were at a loss for words. How did Izuku just do that? They kept asking themselves this question, but only Todoroki put it into words that everyone agreed upon. There's no way that he's quirkless. The bicolored boy grunted as more and more pain entered his system. Izuku looked at the opposing team with a cold expression. The truth is that he wasn't faster than Ada. Far from it actually. He had only used his observation and saw the attack coming long before it happened. This gave him enough time to defend. He felt a little bad for Todoroki, but at the same time he thought that the bicolored boy had it coming. The green-haired boy lowered his right arm before he spoke to his team. They're out of commission. Ada can barely move. Kaminari is zapped. Yaoyorozu is reaching her limit, and Todoroki has to use his flames if he wants to attack. We can just leave them be and wait for the time to run out, he said, and his team responded by nodding and walking away. Team Todoroki gritted their teeth in frustration, for what Izuku had said was all true. Ada's reciprocal burst had left him unable to use his quirk. Kaminari was still suffering the drawback from his own quirk, and Yaoyorozu was already tired. The only one of them that could do anything was Todoroki. He could technically use his ice, but if he did, he would cause unnecessary pain and harm to his broken hand. The bicolored teen would have to use his flames to continue, but for some reason he refused to use his left side. Team Midoriya continued walking away from Team Todoroki. The calm had returned, until a loud bellow was heard zooming through the sky. Deku, it shouted, and everyone already knew that it was a very angry Katsuki. Team Midoriya turned towards it, only to see the angry blonde flying through the air towards them. They all prepared to defend, waiting for Izuku's orders. They were surprised, however, when the green-haired didn't say a word. He just looked at the blonde, as if he was waiting for something. Katsuki was furious. As he approached his target at rapid speeds, he was determined. He was going to get those 10 million points. He was going to crush Deku. He kept nearing from the skies, until his gaze landed on something. It was Izuku's eyes. He saw something strange in them. He couldn't put his finger on it, but it was familiar. It was like that day when they were 4 years old, when he was hit by that odd power. This was enough to throw Katsuki off. As he began to fall towards the ground, he was quickly saved by Shiro, who pulled him back to their team. Team Bakugo then acted as they prepared themselves for another launch. Katsuki, however, didn't launch himself again. His teammates looked at him in confusion before they saw something that shocked them deeply. He was trembling. Katsuki Bakugo was trembling without stopping. Time is up, President Mike then announced, stopping all teams in their tracks. Izuku stopped glaring at Katsuki as he and his teammates breathed sighs of relief. Midnight quickly went over the scoreboard. Team Midoriya came in first, Team Bakugo in second, Todoroki in third, and Shinso in fourth. Todoroki was told to go and see Recovery Girl about his hand, but before leaving he told Izuku that they needed to talk in private afterwards. The green-haired boy wondered what it was all about, but he didn't question it too much. Katsuki was still in shock, and his teammates were unable to reach out to him. He was still trembling, and he still didn't know what was going on. It was as if something inside him had shattered, all because he locked eyes with Izuku. The blonde didn't know what was happening to him, because it was something he wouldn't accept. Katsuki Bakugo wouldn't accept the fact that he is, without a doubt, utterly terrified of Izuku and his mysterious power. After the cavalry battle ended, everyone got a break so that they could go and eat lunch. It was during this time that Izuku and Todoroki had this so-called private talk. The bicolored teen had just been healed by Recovery Girl, and his right hand looked like it had been mummified. You brought me here. Now what? Izuku said to the ice user. Voice being cool, Todoroki's expression seemed conflicted. Between anger and cold intimidation. As he spoke, "I don't buy it, Midoriya," he said, with an equally cold voice. Izuku was a little confused, as he motioned for Todoroki to elaborate. "You may have our classmates and teachers fooled, but you can't fool me. You're not quirkless." "Are you?" the bi-colored boy said, a hint of annoyance revealing itself in his voice. Izuku was caught off guard by this. But he really shouldn't have been. The things that one can do with Haki are superhuman. And looks like a quirk to most people. It was just a matter of time before anyone would notice this. But Izuku wasn't planning on revealing his secret anytime soon. "I don't know what to tell you, Todoroki. I'm quirkless. No more, no less. But may I ask you a question now? Did you get a brain freeze during the cavalry battle? Or were you born that way?" Izuku then said with a cold voice. Todoroki was caught off guard by this response. But he quickly regained his composure before speaking again. "Fine, continue with your deceit, but know that I will defeat you no matter what," the bi-colored teen said, voice showing a weird mixture of anger and cold. Izuku raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. As he asked, "What makes you say that? Brain freeze?" With a calm voice, Todoroki's expression remained stern. As he began to explain, he told Izuku about his childhood. How he was abused by his father. How his mother suffered, and how she poured boiling water over his eye. Above all, he told Izuku one thing. That he was created to surpass all might. Izuku was gripped by shock and sympathy. But he didn't let it show. He didn't want to imagine how much pain Todoroki had been through. And how much he still suffers. "I will win this festival. And I will do it with only my ice. I refuse to use that bastard's power," Todoroki then said, referring to his father. Izuku lowered his gaze slightly. As he quietly muttered, "I see, you were born with incredible power. And the purpose of using said power, yet you reject half of it out of resentment. That's a pretty sad existence. Isn't it?" Todoroki's blood ran cold upon hearing this. As if he was offended by Izuku's words, the green-haired boy ignored him. As he decided to address something that had bothered him for the entirety of the conversation, he turned his gaze to the supposed empty end of the hallway. Before he called out, "I know you're there, Kaken. Show yourself already." Shortly after the command was made, the blonde boy stepped out into the light. Izuku looked at him with a cold expression. As he carefully observed him, Katsuki was clearly shocked by the fact that Izuku knew. But the green-haired boy didn't care about that too much. "Did you plan on eavesdropping on us all day?" Izuku asked, voice being colder than ice. Katsuki didn't answer. He just looked uncertain for some reason. The green-haired boy got a little annoyed. As he spoke his next words, "Look, if you came here to tell us that you'll win, I'm just gonna saw," Izuku said, letting his anger show. But cut himself off mid-sentence when he looked into the blonde's eyes. He saw something that he didn't expect to see. It was something that he knew didn't belong, for it simply wasn't what Katsuki was like. What Izuku saw in his childhood friend was fear in its purest form. And he soon realized that he was the cause of that fear. "Is everything all right, Kaken?" Izuku then asked, sounding genuinely concerned this time. The blonde just looked away upon hearing this. As he quietly muttered, "I'm fine. I won't let you beat me, Deku." Before he walked off, Izuku kept looking in that direction. Still concerned, he didn't know why Katsuki was so afraid of him. Therefore he couldn't stop worrying for him. The green-haired boy then turned his gaze back to Todoroki, who looked either shocked or confused, as he said, "Listen here. Brain freeze, you can't win with just half of your power. If you want a chance at defeating me, you should use your flames." With a cold voice, Todoroki's expression of shock grew wider, for he could feel the menacing aura that was surrounding Izuku. "Now then, I think we're done here. I'm hungry," the green-haired boy then said, before he walked off and left Todoroki behind. The lunch break ended shortly after, and everyone gathered back in the stadium. Midnight quickly went over how the third round would play out, during which Ajiro and a member of Class 1B backed out. A matching was then made, and Izuku would face a student named Hitoshi Shinso in the first round. The green-haired boy was about to go and prepare for the match, when he was stopped by Ajiro. "Midoriya, watch out for Shinso's quirk. I don't know how it works, but I know that I lost control over my body just after responding to one of his questions," the tailed boy said, almost looking a little worried. Izuku, however, was rather fascinated. "A quirk that can basically brainwash you just after a verbal response. That can be a very terrifying weapon for both villainy and heroism." That said, What will Shinso do if his opponent just decides to stay quiet? So he's useless, as long as I zip it? Izuku then stated, quite boldly. Ajiro was shocked, but he then realized that it was just that easy. Thanks, Ajiro. I really appreciate it, Izuku then said, smiling brightly before he left to enter the arena. He then made it just in time, and Present Mike announced them both with passion. The audience roared wildly, eager to watch the quirkless victor of all the previous games. Izuku just stared his opponent down, as if something was bothering him. He faintly remembered some of the words that Shinso had shared with his class before the festival, and they annoyed him slightly. Begin, Midnight then shouted, which prompted Shinso to start talking. Hey, you're Ojiro's classmate, right? Don't you think he's idiotic to just drop out like that? The purple-haired boy said, grinning as he did. Izuku got only a little annoyed by this, but it wasn't enough to make him talk. The green-haired boy then raised two of his fingers up to his lips, before closing them with an imaginary zipper. Shinso saw this action and began to panic slightly. It wasn't just that Izuku showed his intention of staying silent. He was also affected by the terrifying aura that was radiating from the green-haired boy. Izuku then took a step forward, before he began to slowly walk over towards Shinso. The purple-haired teen tried everything from asking questions to throwing nasty insults, but nothing made the green-haired boy talk. Izuku then stood right in front of his opponent, as Shinso began to cower and brace. But then something weird happened. Shinso had prepared himself to get punched in the face, but a punch or a fist never came. What he felt instead was a burning and throbbing pain in his cheek, as he heard the sharp sound of a snap. If no one was looking, they would have thought that the sound had come from a whip. But that wasn't the case this time. Everyone looked and saw that the noise had come from Izuku's open palm, as it collided with Shinso's cheek at high speed. Everyone, from spectator to student and even referee, were shocked upon witnessing this. They couldn't believe, or they didn't want to believe, that Izuku had just slapped Shinso across the face. The green-haired boy looked at his adversary with a dead serious expression, as he, with an ominous voice, said, "Are you going to keep babbling nonsense, or will you at least try to put up a fight?"